Today we're showing you our stainless steel telescopic drum rotator, which is designed to be used in ATEX areas. The machine's air powered, so we connect the air to the machine on this side of the unit or on the left side of the box. The air supply powers our lifting function as well as the clamping and the tipping of the drum. We've got adjustable pads, so this pad is the large type for 200 litre large drums, fibre, plastic and steel. But we can also change these for smaller pads for handling smaller drums around the 50 litre to 150 litre range. What we'll do now, we'll move the unit forward, we'll pick up this drum and a number of others and empty them into the vessel. With the controls, we have all the controls on the back panel here, but we also have a pendant controller which gives us the lift and tipping functions. This allows us to walk forward on the machine and stand to the side of the unit while we're tipping the drum into our vessel. So our pads are open, push the unit forward around the drum. We want to make sure that the centre line of the pad is in the middle of the drum, and we want to make sure the height is adjusted to suit this type of drum. So we're at the right height, I'm happy with the pads, and I'm going to press our clamp button. On the rear panel we have a clamp pressure gauge. The clamp pressure gauge shows us the pressure we're clamping the drum at. So for soft drum we may clamp it with less pressure, and for a more rigid solid drum like this steel we can clamp with a higher pressure. We've got some guides on the gauge, so we have a section for fibre, plastic and metal depending on the drum we're handling. There's an element of operator trial and error with the different drums to make sure that we're not clamping them too much, but we are clamping them securely and tightly. I'm happy with the pressure, so I'm going to press our lift button. I'm pressing the button on the panel, but equally I could remove our pendant here and lift from here. I'm going to push the unit forward to bring the drum towards our tank. Once we're in position, about there should do, we're going to take our pendant, check them lined up. I'm a little bit too far forward, so I'm just going to come back slightly. Happy with the position, we'll begin to tip. It's important when we're tipping with a pendant, we stand clear of the machine to the side, so we don't want to be standing underneath the raised load. But from here I can see very clearly. I'm going to make small adjustments as needed. Sometimes you need to push the unit forward or backwards to adjust the distance you're pouring. Pull the unit back a bit. And we can lower down. Again, I can do this on the panel if needed or using the pendant. We'll lower it down to the floor and then we'll release it. So I'm lowered down, I'll stow our pendant. We have our lift and tip controls on the pendant. On the panel here we have our clamping controls. So to clamp we use one hand, but when we want to unclamp we need to use two fingers. We press at the same time, unclamp. We hold the unclamp until the pressure reaches 0 on our gauge and the arms are fully opened. We can then pull the unit back and we're ready to move on to the next drum. We've now got this 220 litre plastic drum. It's full of water and we'll empty it into the tank. Push the unit forward, the pad's fully open. Visually line up, make sure we're on the centre line. I need to come back a little bit. I'll come back slightly and then we can press our clamp button. We can let the pads move in and monitor our gauge. Here I need to clamp quite a lot more. This drum we're around 80 bar on our gauge. The larger drums we can tend to clamp to very high pressures. When we get to smaller drums or fibre drums, that's when we need to clamp with a lower pressure. So I'm at 80 bar, we're going to lift up. Bring it forwards. About there should do. We'll take our pendant again. Stand to the side. We can make very incremental adjustments with our switch here. Bring the unit forward. Once we're fully empty, we'll turn. We'll bring the unit back. And then lower down. It's good while we're handling the drum to always keep an eye on the clamp pressure, particularly if we're holding a drum up in the air for a long period of time. And at any point we can add pressure by simply pressing the clamp button again. When the drum's empty, obviously it takes a lot less pressure or grip to hold the drum, so we're less worried when the drum's very light or empty. So we place it down, we'll stow our pendant, press unclamp again, 2 fingers, pressing unclamp. Holding the button, the gauge reads 0 bar and the arms are fully open. So once again, we're ready to go get the next drum. We've now got a 200 litre L-ring plastic drum. We repeat the same process. Bring the unit forward, line up our pads and begin to clamp. We can stop clamping, monitor our pressure. Again, I'm clamping up to 80 bar on this one. The plastic drum in the large pads can take a lot of pressure. Pressing our lift button. Bring the unit forward. We've got a tap on this drum, so we'll rotate it into the horizontal and then open the tap. Move it forward very slightly. Stow our pendant. Then I'm going to come forward, open up our tap. We also offer the same type of models with weighing systems. So for some customers who are weighing out product, we can fit a weighing display on the side of the unit to show the real-time weight to the nearest 100 grams of the drum. We won't decant all the material, we'll decant a chunk and then we'll bring the drum back. So once we've emptied the desired amount, I'm going to tilt back a little bit, bring the unit away. This time we'll use the buttons on the panel. Lower down. Unclamping with 2 hands. Once the pressure gauge reads 0, we're ready to get the next one. We're now going to clamp this 200-litre fibreboard drum. We haven't got any powder in our workshop, but we've put 60 kilograms of metal shot in the base of the drum to simulate a half-full drum of powder. Approach the drum like normal. Line up our pads. With fibre drums, they're very soft in construction, so we need to take more care when clamping them so we don't damage or indent them. On our gauge, we've got a position for fibre, which is between 20 and 40 bar. So we're going to clamp up like normal, but I'm going to do it in smaller increments. I'm going to press clamp, wait, let the arms come in. The unit has a constant tension system, meaning that the accumulators in the system are always pushing at the same pressure on the drum. But it's important we let the gauge adjust and then add clamp pressure if needed. So I'm going to press clamp, let the arms move in as they adjust to the new pressure, add some more, just small pulses of clamp, the left arm's moving in, just under 30 bar, and just over 30 bar there. So I'm happy that's enough pressure. I'm going to press the lift button. And again, we should always monitor the clamp pressure while we've got a drum raised. So again, we're just around 30 bar, it's quite steady. I'm happy with that. But if at any point, I can always add clamp pressure. Like I said, this drum we can't pour because it's not got a powder in, but this is simulating a similar drum, a 200-litre size. Once we load it to the ground, press on clamp. Pull the unit away, and you see our drum's nice and round and undamaged. We're now going to show you how to handle smaller drums with this machine, but first we need to change the clamping pads for the smaller design. We've removed the one on the right. Now this left-hand pad, we're going to remove it, and I'll show you how. The first thing we do before we do any work on the head assembly is to fully open the clamps, press the emergency stop button that blocks all the circuits of the machine, and we disconnect the air supply. So the air has been fully disconnected away from the machine. It's now safe to work around the head assembly. To remove this pad, we have a pin. We release the pin, these are on chains. We tilt forward. If you look here, as the pad tilts forward, this is what unlocks it from the head. So when it's closed like that, it won't come off, but we tilt the bottom out and then we lift up. The easiest way to do this is just put your arm through the pad, tilt it back, and then lift it straight up. It's helpful to have a trolley. You can put the pads on the trolley and then wheel them off a storage area. We also, if we're not going to put any pads in, we can refit our locking pins. But what we'll do now is we'll go get our smaller pads. Just like that, we've now got our small pads. We're going to hook these on. So again, just hook over the top. So it hooks on and then lowers down into position. We'll then take our pin, slot it through the hole, and fit our clip to secure it into position. It's important we always fit these pins, but it's worth noting that if we were to clamp without the pin secured, the hydraulic pressure would actually keep these pads in place as an extra safety feature. Take our second pad. On this one I need to remove our pin. I'm just going to remove that. Hook it over. Fit our pin. And our R-clip to lock it into position. Once I'm happy all the pins are secure, we're now ready to move on and handle some smaller drums. We've now got a 120 litre Mauser drum. It's an open top drum full of water. Line up our pads and press the clamp button. With these, just short pulses, let the clamp pressure adjust. I'm going to come in part way into the plastic part of the gauge up to around 50 bar. We can start to get a small amount of ovaling of the lid, but on the whole we haven't indented the drum. So we lift it first. Observe, make sure it's gripping adequately, still at 50 bar on the gauge. I'm happy with that, so we're going to lift. We'll move forward. It's quite full drum, so we don't want to spill any. Come forward towards our vessel. To get a better view, I'm going to get our pendant out. Come forward slightly. And we'll begin to tip. Full empty. Bring the unit back. And lower down. And looking at our clamp pressure, still got 50 bar of pressure. We'll lower it all the way down to the ground. Hang up our pendant and press unclamp. Move the unit away. You can see at 50 bar, the drum's in good condition. We're ready to go get the next one. For very small drums that are very short, we need to lift off a pallet to get the drums into the gripping head. The legs will straddle around the pallet. We can then press our clamp button. Clamp arms are coming in. Just short pulses of clamp pressure, keep an eye on our gauge. So we're about 50 bar there. We'll lift and just check. It's not a very heavy drum, it's full of water, so it's probably around 50 kilos. Happy with that, so let's move it back and tip into our vessel. Just going slowly so we don't spill any. Bring the unit forward. Going to come right over our vessel this time. We'll now grab this drum and tip that one as well. Bring it forward. Letting our arms come in with the constant tension system. Small bursts of clamp pressure. Once the arms are engaged, then just tweak our clamp pressure up. So just on the bottom end of the plastic section of the gauge. Bring the unit round. Take our pendant. Once we're lined up, begin tipping. Once we're happy we've dosed all the amount, we can bring the drum back and place it back on our pallet. We'll bring the unit straddle the pallet. Like so. and then unclamp. Gauge reaches 0 and we're ready to move on. The last drum we're going to show you, we've got another fibreboard drum. This drum's got some various powder and metal shot in the base of it to simulate a weight. First of all, we clamp it up. Pulses of clamp, let the arms adjust. Now about 30 bar, which is the middle of the fibre setting. Lift it up, make sure it's holding the drum securely. And then we'd be ready to lift and tip this into our tank. We're now looking at the rear control panel of the unit. We've got a steel drum clamped into the head. We clamp the drum by pressing this clamp button in the centre. It's normal after clamping for the needle of the gauge to settle very slightly. If at any time we want to add clamp pressure, we can press the clamp button again. Up here we have our lift and rotation buttons. So we press lift or lower. I'm going to lift up and then I'll show you rotation. So with this lifted, we can tip forward or tip backward. We have these same controls for lift and rotation on our pendant controller, so we can lift, lower and rotate. So the drum positioned upright, we will lower it down to the ground. Once it's on the ground, to unclamp, currently we're around 85 bar. To unclamp, we'll use 2 fingers and press unclamp together. You notice how I held the buttons until the needle reached the 0 position on the gauge and the arms are fully unclamped. Our clamp pressure gauge in the centre, and then we have our emergency stop button. We press this down to cut all power to the machine, and we twist it clockwise and it pops up to reset the machine.